Hi, this is Tim, and I've been out today flying my homemade 3D printed quadcopter, which I've called Palantir 3. It's called Palantir after the Palantiri in Lord of the Rings, which allowed remote viewing, and that's kind of what the quad does. The idea of these test flights is just to take off, hover a bit, get a feel for the controls, and then land safely. So the first few flights, that's what we'll see. And in the later flights I try out some of the navigation features of iNav, which is the software that's running on the flight controller. Up to 11 satellites now, down to 1 meter of precision. And the quad is armed. And we're taking off. And as I said, the objective here is just to take off, hover a little bit, get a feel for the controls, and then land again safely, ideally on the blue mat. So just getting a feel here for where the takeoff point is on the throttle, and away we go. It's quite a big heavy quad and therefore somewhat difficult to handle, and I have a bit of a tendency to slam into the ground. I don't know quite why that is. I'm sure that may be just experience. I need to get a bit more practice with it. So the second flight coming up is more of the same. Take off, hover a bit, and then try and land back on the blue mat. Almost looks like I'm getting the hang of it there. Slam into the floor again. Must watch out for that. It's very, very sensitive to the slightest breeze, which is why I deliberately picked a day when the wind was about 2 miles per hour or less, and that makes it a lot easier to handle. It's carried off very easily by even the slightest breeze. So the third flight coming up, I believe, is the same again. Take off, hover and land. And I've realised I've got the wrong screen showing and I've put it right. So you can see now this shows me my battery voltage, 4.07 volts, 85% charge. And under that is a compass heading. Down the left hand side, the first number is the altitude, the next number is the throttle setting, then the third number is the 0.05 is the amps being drawn by the motors, and then under that is the milliamp hours drawn. Bottom left is the number of satellites. The little house icon means I'm over the home location, over where I took off from, and angle means I'm in angle mode, which is a computer assisted flight mode. The lines across the middle of the screen is the artificial horizon. Came down a bit heavy there, but sometimes once you're on the ground, the right thing to do is just to cut the engines and call it a landing. So that's what happened there. Now, in the next flight, I believe I try out a navigation feature called altitude hold, which is where the flight computer takes over management of the altitude, and it tries to keep you at a constant altitude. and while it's in that mode you can actually override it with the joysticks on the radio transmitter, and so I believe that's what happens in this next flight. Look at the bottom where it says angle. In a moment you should see it say altitude hold. There it is, and you hear the motors suddenly rev up as it goes into that mode. I don't know why it does that. So I'm just flying around getting a feel for the controls now. So in this mode, instead of directly controlling the throttle joystick actually acts as like a increase or decrease altitude stick, which is subtly different from just controlling the throttle. It's a different feel. Oh, and I've spun around to face me and Fern, and again slamming to the ground, landing earlier than anticipated. But again, once you're on the ground, sometimes it's better just to take it. I'm quite surprised at this point that I haven't crashed and burned, because that's what's happened on all my previous flights. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. I think I'm trying to rearm it and it's resisting me for some reason. Okay, here we go. Now at this point, I think you'll hear the propellers rev up and down a few times. Okay, here we go. I've actually taken off in altitude hold mode here. And I believe I'm about to put position hold mode on. There we go, hold mode. Now in this mode, the quad, if you let go of the sticks on the radio, it should stay exactly where it is in space, or as near as possible within the precision of GPS, which is probably plus or minus a meter. And then I've taken off position hold, and I think it gets put back on in 3, 2, 1. There it is, position hold. Okay, so I'm just again getting used to the feel of the sticks in this mode, and you can see the quad's a lot steadier now, much less prone to wandering around in the breeze. The little downward pointing arrow just above the word hold is the direction to home indicator. So on the display it always points to where you took off from. And when you're over the takeoff point, that changes to a little house icon. So this is handling much more like a DJI Mavic or something like that now. It's much easier to fly in this mode. And then it gets a bit exciting, because I accidentally, or I actually deliberately activate the return to home mode, testing the failsafe features, and that causes it to shoot to the moon, and then I recover out of that mode and come back down to the ground, and then I activate it again, and wait for it. Okay, I'm back in position hold mode now. I think we might be coming in for a landing. Okay, so what's supposed to happen there is the flight controller has a fail-safe mode, so anytime it gets out of range of the radio, it loses the signal or something untoward happens, it goes into fail-safe mode, and in this instance I've got it programmed to enter return to home mode. And what's supposed to happen in that mode is that the quad gains altitude, and I think it's set to gain 10 meters above whatever the highest altitude was in the last flight, and then it's supposed to fly back to the home position and either hover or land. And this is actually probably the first time I've had this working properly. And I must say it was quite frightening, and I lost my bottle a bit, and so, oh look, you can see all flying ants crawling around on the mat there. There are a lot of flying ants today. And I lost my bottle a bit, and I managed to accidentally disarm the quad, and by flicking the wrong switch, and disarming basically immediately cuts the motors. It's a safety feature, and so at which point it plummets to earth, and I managed to actually rearm it before it hits the ground, and it starts to try and recover, but it doesn't quite recover in time. It has a really heavy landing and breaks one of the motors off. So here we go, this is going to be quite an exciting flight. There it goes, and I should have just let it be at this point, but I fiddled with all the switches and I hit the wrong one, and there, disarmed, and over it goes. Here comes the ground, and I recover, and not quite in time, and it hits the ground, and that is game over. Now, the reason the video cut out here, it's not as bad as it looks, it's just because it's down behind the crest of a hill and didn't have line of sight to the receiver. But basically, that was game over for today, because I broke a motor off and I need to replace one of the arms. And I have a box of arms ready to go because I've learnt the hard way, they break really easily. So that's that. Until next time. I've been Tim, thanks for watching, and goodbye.